Finding Common Battlegrounds is an attempt by two brothers, one conservative, the other progressive, to have civil conversations about politics with a little help from their friends.
Welcome, Finding Common Battleground listeners. Welcome to another podcast today. Today we're going to be talking about replacement theory and is replacement theory real? So we'll talk about that more in a second. But first, I've got, if you're not familiar with the format, this is the podcast where we find common ground to see what we try to focus on, what we agree on more than what we disagree on. And we have Ryan Cragen and Josh Cragen representing both sides. Ryan representing the liberals and Josh representing the conservatives. You wouldn't know it because we're all wearing Democratic blue today, but whatever. Yes, each side has some points that they're going to throw at each other, and we're going to see how often they can get the other side to agree with them. First, a word from our sponsor. We're going to go with Lux Bidets and talk about that. If you guys aren't, if you're still a barbarian wiping your butt with toilet paper, rethink your life, okay? And start spraying it down. Yes, we are in a drought in the West, but I don't know which worse, right? A bunch of literally crappy paper that has to get managed through the sewer system, or just using a little water to wipe your butt. You're already like dumping like a quart of water with every flush, so just add a little more. And
have you ever smelled somebody that didn't wipe properly?
Josh.
I'm serious.
Not any adults.
I have smelled kids. Like old men I've smelled that didn't wipe properly. Just like, oh my gosh, this dude needs a bidet. Sorry, one up me. I dare you.
So the locker room where I changed to go play soccer at my work, right? It's like the locker room for coaches. I was in there one day. And I was in there after soccer. I dropped off my stuff and went in to shower. And when I came back, there was a bench and there was a brown streak where one of the coaches had sat down. And I was like, "You're kidding me. No, I know what that is. And that is not okay. You need a bidet. You need a Lux bidet." Oh my gosh. Man. It was nasty.
I'm all about promoting bidet, but I don't know if I want to air that story. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, seriously. All right, we'll move on.
On that note,
crying out loud.
For the three rejects still listening after that.
Whoa. Okay. So yes, replacement theory. So we're just going to talk about this. Basically talking about if it's real. And so basically kind of the catalyst for this is there was the mass shooting, was it last week in Buffalo? Yep. I think 10 people were killed. They were all minorities, and I think the shooter was white, and he had written a pretty lengthy manifesto and mentioned replacement theory. And it seemed to be a motivation. And so the question is, what we're talking about is, and replacement theory is basically the idea that white Americans are being systemically and replaced in a conspiratorial way, right? A planned way. And so that's really the what replacement theory is, that there's some.
It's not just Americans, right? Because it started in France, so it's whites, European.
Yeah, but I think we're focused primarily
Caucasian whites. Well, that's where it came from.
I don't know.
It came from France.
So it is globally kind of a global theory.
Well, it came from France because they were worried about migrants from Africa in particular, right? And so they're basically saying like, no, we need to hold the line as, white French individuals. We want to limit migration, and then it spread across the pond. And literally the guy who coined it was a Frenchman, right? He coined the term the Great Replacement or replacement theory.
Yeah,
replacement. I think it's a great replacement.
So I've read a few articles on it, but let's just go ahead and kick this thing off, because that usually starts the conversation anyway. I'm going to start with Ryan. I tried to keep it pretty vague, Ryan, because some of your questions are going to get more into this. So I'll start with Ryan's question for Josh. And let's see here. Josh, can we agree that the Census Bureau has projected that the percentage of the U.S. population that is non-Hispanic white is going to decrease over time?
Okay. So I apologize in advance. This first point is a little bit long, but I'm giving a little bit of the background that I think Tom knew was coming here. So I'm particularly interested in the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, and I'm using that very intentionally because it's rooted in demography, which is an area of sociology. And for our listeners, that's literally my profession. That's what I do. For those who are not aware of what demography is, it's the study of populations and tends to focus on things like births, deaths, and of course, migration. Basically, how does a population change over time? One of the really cool things about demography is that when it comes to the study of large populations, it's actually very accurate at making predictions. We can't predict the behavior of any one individual, but we can predict what's going to happen with large groups of people. For instance, we can predict roughly how many kids are going to be born in any year or how many people are going to die based on previous years and then relevant factors. Okay. With all of that as background, what is the situation with migration and the percentage of the US population that is white, since that is the heart of the Great Replacement conspiracy theory? The Census Bureau, which is staffed by demographers, right, sociologists and demographers, issued some projections in 2015 based on 2014 data. And I can put the link anywhere if you guys want to look at the table. I have the table up, right? Nope. But we don't have to. But I think the numbers are actually really interesting. And I think it's useful to get these numbers into the conversation right from the get-go, okay? So they were projecting from 2014 to 2060. So we're still looking 40 years in the future. By 2060, the US population will be about 417 million people, or about 90 million more than we have at present, okay? In 2014, and these numbers, like, pay close attention because they get a little bit tricky here. In 2014, 62.2% of the US population identified as non-Hispanic white, okay? And keep in mind, Hispanic is an ethnicity, not a race. So if we add white Hispanics to that percentage, it goes up to 77.5. Okay. And if we need to unpack the Hispanic versus not Hispanic, we can do that separately. By 2060, the Census Bureau projects that the percentage of non-Hispanic whites in the US will drop to 43.6%, below 50%.
Does that mean I can call myself Hispanic if I feel like it? I can identify as Hispanic.
Of course.
It's a bit more complicated than that. But
you can call yourself whatever you want.
Because it's not a race.
But it's not a race. It's an ethnicity. Well, ethnicity refers to a shared culture. That's all it means, right? Exactly. So a shared culture. So do you speak Spanish? Do you have Spanish ancestry?
But
Spanish,
does any of that really even matter?
Nope.
I listen to Spanish music, right? It's like, I'm Hispanic.
I'm a drum set.
I guess you could. Oh, God.
Well, that's funny because they actually ask that question in a lot of like hiring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are you non-white or
Hispanic? They're trying to track minority hires, right?
Right.
Okay. So
whatever. All right. Sorry.
Picking up with the numbers again, remember in 2014, it was 62.2% of the population was non-Hispanic white.
Yeah.
By 2060, that's going to drop to 43.6%.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if we add back in Hispanic white individuals, it goes up to 74.3%. Okay. So basically what the Census Bureau is saying, and their projections are generally pretty accurate. Obviously, things can change. We could change migration policies again. We could do lots of different things. But based on their current projections, we're going to see, and this is where we get to my point with Josh, we're going to see a decline in the non-Hispanic white population in the US over the next 40 years. So, Josh, this is just a straight fact agreement. Can we agree that the Census Bureau has projected that the percentage of the US population that is non-Hispanic white is going to decrease over time?
Ryan, can we agree that you could have just said white people will not be a minority in the near future?
A majority,
or a majority in the near future without boring us with 40 minutes of numbers.
I think that was 4 minutes of numbers.
It felt like 4 hours.
I just drained 4 minutes of your life. How do you feel?
That was so needlessly overcomplicated.
Right. You agree, Josh. You agree. All right.
Sure.
Okay. Ding, ding. Good job, Ryan.
Yay. We agree on facts. I like it.
I almost disagree just because you were so boring. Let's talk about poop again. Jeez.
I'm either too intense or not intense enough. Josh, come on, take a pick.
Okay. All right. We're going to move on. Ryan, would you agree that we currently have a bit of a problem with illegal immigration? Josh,
let me read numbers. I'm going to read so many numbers. Okay, this is literally the first article that popped up. It's a Yahoo article. I think Yahoo's probably a little left. I don't know. I don't care.
It is. Yeah.
Nearly 2 million people were encountered by federal law enforcement while attempting to enter the United States illegally over the past year. Data released Friday afternoon by U.S. Customs and Border Protection shows that federal law enforcement officials stopped almost 2 million non-citizens who tried to gain entry to the U.S. by walking across from Canada or Mexico. The large majority of the 1.9 million, 1.66 million were stopped by the Border Patrol. I mean, you get the point, right?
Boring, I don't want to read all the numbers. Oh,
I agree, right? So you get the point.
Sure.
This is the biggest influx of illegal immigrants in 97 years. Okay.
Okay.
Is this a problem?
What was the question?
Would you agree that we currently have a bit of a problem with illegal immigration?
Okay. Maybe I am for open borders, right? But for other, we've talked about borders before, right? I am for open borders. So if the question is there illegal immigration because legally right now we don't allow it, then yes, that's absolutely true. I'm not denying the numbers. The numbers are absolutely true. Do I think it's a serious problem as far as more people coming into this country? That's a different question. So if we don't want to go down that path, we'll just leave that for now.
That'll actually be my second question, because I knew you would go, well, I'm okay with open borders. Everybody should come here. So that's actually my second question I want to talk about. But
I don't think everybody should come here.
I just wanted to establish a fact to start with. Softball.
Good.
We have
lots of people trying to get into the country right now.
The numbers coming in are insane, and these you agreed these are a direct result of Biden policies, right? This is a big influx under Biden.
It's crazy. I don't. Do we have to add that second part, right?
Well,
there are lots of other forces. There are push and pull factors when somebody's migrating.
Would it be safe to say it was more curtailed during the Trump administration?
Mm-hmm. I'll agree with that. Right. It's just it's complicated.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm going to move on. Okay. I kind of got an agreement. You don't think it's a problem, but you do agree that
the numbers. I totally agree with the numbers.
Is increasing.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Josh, can we agree that the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, is openly, blatantly, and unapologetically racist?
Mm-hmm. So much shorter point this time. If you recall my first point, I distinguish between race and ethnicity. We can discuss that if we need to. If we included Hispanic whites with non-Hispanic whites, the percentage white stays pretty steady in the next 40 years, declining by 3%. Okay. But people seem really bothered by including Hispanic individuals with non-Hispanic individuals and only seem to care about non-Hispanic whites declining. That strikes me as reflective of what is really underlying the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, which isn't even subtle or masked. I mean, literally with the shooter and what just happened, he drove hours from his home to go find a predominantly Black grocery store so he could kill minorities. So the Great Replacement theory is openly and blatantly and unapologetically racist. Can we agree with that?
Are you saying the theory itself or people? Like, I'm not sure I understand the question. The theory itself, it's obviously based on race, because like when it came out, this French guy came out with it. It's almost like not almost. It's a white supremacist viewpoint, right? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's all I'm asking.
Because I absolutely agree with that. It's a strange conspiracy theory put out there by neo-Nazis, basically saying we need to keep the white bloodlines pure. Okay. It's crazy and it's racist. I'll absolutely agree with that. No problem.
Ding, ding. Yay.
Right. Getting lots of...
I think we need to fight more. Didn't you say that our listeners want us to fight more?
Well, we're going to get to it.
Oh, okay.
Ryan, you took my ding ding. All right, I'm gonna.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Warning there.
yellow card. I want a yellow card.
Yellow card.
Yes. I just need one more, and Ryan kicked out, and I get to debate myself.
Win by forfeit. Okay.
I need to draw a foul here.
Ryan, would you agree that the Palestinians might have some thoughts about unchecked immigration?
What?
Okay, I knew you were going to go with this.
When you say Palestinian, do you mean Jews?
No, I mean the Palestinians. Okay, I'll give a quick overview of the historical situation there in the Middle East. Okay, the Jews were persecuted all through Europe, right? Everywhere they went, they were kicked out. They were killed. They had pogroms for 1,000 years, where the citizens would rise up. Usually, the politicians would rally them up and say it's the Jews' fault that we have the Black Plague or whatever, and then they'd go and kick all the Jews out. And the Jews got really sick of this, so they decided they needed a home. So they wrote to the emperor of the Ottoman Empire. I think it was the Sultan of Turkey. I think it was, and he controlled that whole area at the time. Right, this is before World War II, and they said, "Can we come live in our ancient homeland? You know, in the Levant, because we don't have a home." And the Muslims were so cool at the time. He said, "Absolutely, you guys are our brothers from the tribe of Judah. There's plenty of room for everybody. Come on in. Come on into the Levant, and we'll make you feel at home." Okay, really cool, right? The Muslims gave the Jews a home because they had been persecuted for 1,000 years and they had nowhere to live. The Jews moved in, and what did they immediately do? They had more money and were better educated than the Palestinians and the people that lived there. So they immediately started buying up land, and then they would they started to take over the government, and they started to pass laws saying that Jewish land can't be worked by the natives, by Palestinians that lived there. So they started buying these farms that had been passed down for generations by Palestinian families, and then they'd kick them off. And sometimes they'd just lay fallow, right? So the Jews moved in and took over, and that's undeniable. Now we have the state of Israel. The
state of Israel is more complicated, though.
I have how long am I to explain this? Yes, it's a very complicated situation.
I don't know, 40 minutes or something. Oh, boring. I'm actually really interested. Keep going.
It's a super interesting thing.
Josh explains things really well. He's a great storyteller.
Thank you.
Continue, Josh.
Well, you see the point of what I'm getting at, right? So you had
somebody moved in, they took over and replaced the existing population.
Yeah, they literally took over, right? Even though they were still the minority, they took over the government and they had all the money and they had all the power. So they started making all these laws where the Palestinians lost all power because of what eventually turned into unchecked immigration. Okay, so there are obviously instances where we have to worry about open borders and people just moving in and taking over it. This is one of the biggest conflicts in the world and has been in my entire lifetime. It started with unchecked immigration. They were invited in. The Muslims were really cool and said, "Come on in," and then the Jews took over. Okay, I wanted to ask you real quick.
I mean, can we complicate that by saying that the Ottoman Empire fell to the British, basically, and then the British are the ones who helped establish the state of Israel? Like, it was a little bit more complicated.
It's way more complicated than that. The French had a lot to do with that as well.
Right. And World War II happened, and there was a Holocaust.
World War II happened.
I mean, it's more complicated than hey, come in and the British take over. It was complicated.
Well, no, they started to fight back, and I mean, it's a really fascinating thing.
But Israelites were there before World War II, yes, but yeah, it didn't become an official state until after World War. That the official state thing that's going to cost you 6 million Jews. All right,
geez.
Costly.
Well,
high price. Yeah. Okay, we'll pay it.
But that was part of why Israel did that, right? Because they were still experiencing pogroms, and the Holocaust was just a really, really bad one where they were being persecuted.
Are you saying pilgrims or
pogroms? Pogrom. Pogroms.
Okay, what a pogrom is? It's like a mini genocide kind of thing.
Yeah. Please explain it for our listeners so they understand. I know.
This happened over and over again to the Jews. They would move into Russia or
Poland or take your pick, any of those
European countries, and they would do great when they'd first move in because they're industrious and they're educated, right? And so when they move in, everybody's, oh, great, this guy is supplying a need. We like him.
He's doing my books and doing
he's,
stuff. It's great.
A banker. Let's do all the stereotypes. And then when something would go wrong, like a plague would sleep in or there's a financial downturn, the politicians would go, oh, well, it's not my fault. The politician, it's the Jews. Go get them. And this kept happening. So then everybody would get together and they'd turn into a mob, and then you'd have a night of violence where they'd go and kill and rape the Jews and take all their stuff and drive the survivors out of town. This happened over and over again to the Jews. So they had a very real grievance.
I saw Fiddler on the Roof. I know how this works.
There you go. Okay. So they had very real grievance. The whole world screwed them over, and we all screwed them over in World War II. And then they went and screwed over the Muslims. And now the Muslims are screwing everybody. Like, it's this weird cycle. Everybody is to blame. It's really complicated. Ryan's right. It's complicated. But this was an uncontrolled immigration problem. Ryan, do you know a sociologist by the name of Seeley Martin? He's in Tampa. Okay. He has, I just pulled this up. The problem of unchecked immigration. He has this really interesting document that he did. Is this guy any good? I don't want to throw him under the bus. It was literally the first one that pulled up on when I searched for it. And then I saw he's a sociologist in Tampa. Well, Ryan probably knows him. But he talks about some of the problems we're going to run into in the near future with this huge influx of immigration. Okay. I agree with
We're talking about Americans now.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree with Ryan to an extent about open borders. Hopefully that's the way of the future. But if you just allow so many people into the country, our economy can't sustain that. Okay. There's numbers out there that say, I think at least about half of immigrants here are on some sort of welfare program. Okay. We talked about before we started that we don't have money. And so this is a drain on the system. So there are reasons where, what I'm trying to get at, Ryan, are there reasons where you should check immigration, where there should be some checks and balances on the flow of people here? Or are you really just, for right now, are you all about open borders? Or anybody that should come and go?
Do we want to go down this path of open borders?
We did talk about this already.
Yeah, I thought we had.
Just give me a brief summary on your thought there, because I'll get to why I'm getting to it.
Yeah, open borders is fundamentally capitalist. It's supply and demand.
Sure,
right.
That's why I partially agree with you.
See, so it's basically saying, oh, well, if there's a lot of demand here and supply here, if we open the borders, then the market, the invisible hand of the market, actually manages population flow instead of artificial policies, often policies that are completely racist, right? Which we've done. Like much of our history here in the US is basically playing favorites with different groups of people. We banned the Chinese from coming in for a while. We banned people from this country. We banned people from that country. And it just depends on who we don't like at a certain period of time. But those are all artificial laws and regulations, right?
Let's talk about that because it's actually germane to the conversation. A while back, I was listening to somebody talk about this today. The government didn't want educated Europeans here. They wanted poor people because the corporations, the heads of corporations, wanted cheap labor. So some of these issues or some of these policies that you're talking about, they were motivated by capitalists, the heads of corporations that wanted cheap labor. So we said, no, we don't want white Europeans because you're more likely to be educated. So I'm actually agreeing with you. A lot of these are, I wouldn't say racially motivated. They're drawn on racial lines, but they're more class motivated or
I mean, they're both
capitalist
I would say both.
motivated. So let's just be clear. It's not that we're just saying it's all a racist thing. They're racial lines that are drawn. Does that make sense?
I'm fine with that. As long as we're just saying, like, we choose who we're going to discriminate against. And that's what those policies are. And if we just had open borders, none of that would happen. The invisible hand of the market would manage population flows. And the other benefit of open borders is we would now have an incentive to not just extract resources from other places, but to actually try and make the whole world a better place.
Develop those places.
Yeah, if we develop it, they won't come here, right? That's the idea. But if we just restrict it, then everybody's going to want to come here because all we're doing is extract. I mean, we talked about this before too, right? Haiti owes France money. Like, that's absurd. Like, absolutely asinine that would actually be the case, because it's just France extracting resources from people who have nothing to begin with. But that's basically the way the world order works. And then we just we build our walls and say, no, some people get to come here and live a life of luxury. The rest of you have to live in squalor. And if we open the borders, we can't do that anymore. That's the logic behind open borders.
And that's good.
Yeah, because now we have to we want to help everybody develop. right?
But or we're going to spread all of our poverty. It's going to get spread everywhere.
But answer this question: could you just open the borders completely right now, and there would be no consequences?
I have no idea what would happen. My guess is that it would probably be bad, at least initially.
That's what I want. That's the answer that I'm looking for. That's where we find common ground here. It's worth talking about. It's worth having a conversation about this because it's really complicated and we need to be able to talk about it. Yes, you agree with that?
About migration.
Yeah, we should be able to talk about it.
Yeah, we've talked about migration. I have no problem talking about migration. I think I actually bring this up in my
Let's go back to the question. So, Ryan, you agree that that Palestinians might have some thoughts about unchecked immigration, meaning they're not happy about it.
Yeah,
you agree.
They lost their country. It's almost a facetious question. They lost their country about it. I'm just asking
if that's an apples to apples or an apples to orange question, but or a comparison. But I get the point, right? Okay. Like unchecked migration.
That was a bad situation for
can potentially lead to problems depending on all sorts of complicating factors. I think that's fair. I'm not disagreeing with that point.
Okay. All I wanted.
All right, great. Woohoo! Ding ding. Good job, Josh. Okay, I'm moving on to Ryan's last question here. Josh, can we agree that there is no secret cabal driving the demographic change that is taking place in the U.S.?
Okay, so we're coming back to this issue, right? On the issue of the cabal, because that is what underlies the Great Replacement, right? What advocates of this conspiracy theory think is happening is that there is a secret cabal of Jews and progressives who are trying to bring in racial and ethnic minorities to replace quote unquote native whites. First, anyone who thinks people of European ancestry are natives to North America is an asshole. Europeans engaged in genocide to wipe out the vast majority of Native Americans. Native Americans are the only natives here.
Okay, what's the statute of limitations? When can I call myself an American?
You can call yourself an American. You're not a Native American.
No, we're not. Native Americans are Native Americans.
Second, the fact that they think there is a secret cabal driving demographic change that shows that these individuals are just purely ignorant. There is no need for a secret cabal. Literally, this is all about demographic forces. What can be debated, and this goes to Josh's last point, what can be debated here is whether shifting racial and ethnic percentages is a good thing. We can debate that, right? Like if people want to have that debate, I'm fine with that. But can we agree that there is no secret cabal of Jews and progressives driving this demographic change?
No. Why do you think I brought the Jews up earlier? they're gonna the New World Order.
Yeah.
Something. Yes, I'm not aware of any secret cabal trying to destroy white people.
It's totally unnecessary. If we want to debate the change, that's fine, but it's totally not necessary. It's just demographic forces, and it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I'm actually. That's interesting. You bring that up because what I'm seeing. Well, I guess this leads into my third question. So I guess we'll wrap this up. Go to my third question, and then we'll kind of discuss this.
All right, ding ding for Ryan, and we're going to move on to Josh's third and final question. Ryan, would you agree that every couple years the left comes up with some new strawman argument which it uses to paint the right as a horrible, terrible, demonic entities bent on the destruction of civilization?
Yes.
Thank you. Because it's true.
But doesn't the right do the same thing with the left?
Well,
hey, come on. I gave you agreement, just straight.
Give me some. I'll give you some examples of exactly what I'm talking about, and then if you can match my examples, then I'll give you agreement. Because I don't like to be partisan here, but so about 10 years ago, I was told that I had declared war on women, right? That I hate women and I don't like their, whatever. I don't even know what it was about, but I was told as a conservative that I had declared war on women. That was the talking point.
It was just you mean just generically?
Why did we stop talking for 5 years? You called me a misogynist multiple times, right?
I don't know, probably.
You did. Okay. And then I was told that I want to control women's bodies. Really? I want to. I have a wife and 2 daughters who are like the most important people in the world to me, but I have declared war on them and I want to control their bodies. Okay. This is what I'm told by the left. And then I was told that I hate gay people, which is news to me. I guess I need to get rid of some of my friends and family members. Now I'm being told I hate trans people, which is again news to me. I need to get rid of some of my friends.
Well, yeah.
And now,
so to your point, Josh, Utah gets one of the lowest ratings on women's rights, and it's based on a few factors, which is they have a low workforce representation, right? And it makes this so it's a kind of a weird thing, right? It's this angle of like, well, you hate women, but what you're like, well, actually it's because we have a lot of stay-at-home moms, and you could look at it from a perspective of, well, we're actually honoring women by letting them be moms because they want to be moms, and
that's the problem. Right? That's why it's a weird conflation.
Yes, it's a weird conflation.
I love my wife and I love my children, so my wife decided she wanted to stay home with my children. So I'm okay. That's what she decided. I didn't decide that for her. She wanted to do that. Now that our children are in school, she wants to go back to the workforce. But I was called a misogynist several times, really just because I'm a conservative, but also because my wife wasn't working, and well, how dare you not let her work? That's her choice.
But can we just be clear that I don't think I ever called you a misogynist because Jessica wasn't working, and she was still working.
You didn't call me misogynist over her. You did call me a misogynist.
But that was probably just because you were a conservative.
Some general viewpoints
over abortion or something. I don't know.
Right.
Sure.
Yes. Okay. And let's touch on that really quick, because I don't want to paint Ryan with a bad brush here, because he was the bigger man in the end here. Okay. Ryan and I stopped talking for about 5 years, or give or take, because he recycled these liberal talking points.
Okay? Irreconcilable differences.
Well, not really.
Okay.
To win arguments, and this is what the left did and still does, they just say, well, you're a racist if you don't agree with me. You're a misogynist if you don't agree with me. You hate gay people if you don't agree with me. And then Ryan, to his credit, a couple of years ago, somebody that was further left than him said, you're not woke enough. You're what did they call you? You're a racist because you weren't as far left as them. I mean, you should probably tell the story.
I claimed that smoking caused cancer, and this person said, why do you keep attacking me because I'm a smoker? And I was like, why are you not in touch with reality? And the person got physically aggressive with me over this issue. Yeah, got physically aggressive because I just literally said,
you're laying out.
I mean, even the cigarette manufacturers know that it causes cancer. Like, everybody does. And this person's like, no, that's not true. It does not cause cancer. You're making that up. And why are you attacking me on this point? And I was like, okay, you jumped the shark, right? Like, you are so out of touch with reality that if this is that trajectory of wokeness where you can literally just make claims that are complete and utter bullshit, right? Like, no, smoking doesn't cause cancer because I smoke and I don't have cancer, right? So clearly it doesn't matter. And I was just like, no, we're done. I can't go down that path. I can't go down that path where I'm out of touch with reality. At the end of the day, there are certain things that are real, that are facts. And if we can't agree on those, then that's a problem. And that did lead me down the path of trying to reconcile with Josh and Danny and other siblings, where I was just like, hey, we can still have conversations. We may disagree on some elements, but we can have conversations. Yeah.
Because you saw the error, the problem with just saying, well, if you don't agree with me, if you don't agree with me, you're a racist.
Yep.
I can't have a conversation if that's what you're going to do.
Agreed.
And that was one of the best days of my life when I received that heartfelt letter from Ryan saying, sorry, that's not what I was trying to do. And now I see it, that's not helpful. And that's not helpful for the conversation. Ryan agrees with that. And now we're talking again, obviously, because you guys are listening to us.
Good job, great. Ryan.
Yeah, all props to Ryan, because he reconciled that relationship. And I'm not saying I was completely not in the wrong and I never insulted him. But this is a leftist thing to do, to just paint anybody that you disagree with as a bigot, because then you get to claim the moral high ground and people can't have a discussion with you. And I think that's what's happening right now. If you disagree...
if you have concerns about immigration, you are now
you're a racist.
You're buying into replacement theory.
Yep.
Which then means you're racist.
Yes, that's kind of the talking. Well, not kind of. That's the talking point with a lot of the leftist pundits right now. And I had a video that I was thinking about playing, but I don't want to hammer that anymore because I think you guys will agree. That's not helpful to paint. This piece of crap that went and did the mass shooting in Buffalo, he's a psychopath. To paint everybody on the right as racists and people that buy into this white racial superiority thing because one guy proved that he was a psychopath is not helpful. Yes, you get to claim the moral high ground, but it doesn't help us fix this problem, and it's not accurate. Okay, because I've mentioned this before. This is another Jordan Petersonism. The right knows when the people on the right go too far. Okay, we can call that out. When you become racist and start making these claims of racial superiority, the right will say no. Or the mainstream right says we don't agree with you. You're no longer a part of us. You've gone too far. Whereas the left has a much harder time saying when people on the left go too far, when obviously the left can go too far. So everybody on the right, the mainstream right looks at this guy and goes, you've gone too far. You're a racist. We don't like that. But the talking point on the left, this new one that they've come up with to gain the moral superior high ground, is that we're all a bunch. If you have any problems with immigration, if you want to talk about it, if you see any concerns there, you're a racist. I can't agree with that. Brian, where do you fall on that?
Was there a question? I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm trying to remember what the question
was. Would you agree that the left comes up with a new talking point every couple of years? Ben?
Well, I think I agree with that general sentiment, but one, maybe it's just because of the media that I consume, right? I don't follow left-leaning media. I'm not watching MSNBC. I'm not reading The Nation. I haven't been seeing that talking point. I have seen the demonization, I'm going to use that term, and it might be accurate, I don't know, of Tucker Carlson, because he has been advocating for great replacement theory.
Well, that's part of it.
Right. And I think he's been, the term is terrible that came to mind. He's been whitewashing it, right? He's been like slimming it down a little bit. So he's not making it blatantly racist, but he is talking about the idea behind it. And that means that it's a little bit more mainstream among conservatives than maybe we want to admit. I don't know. I honestly don't know that, right? I think it's perfectly fine to have discussions about immigration. So if that's the issue, like, sure, let's have conversations about immigration. I don't have a problem with that. And I don't think calling people bigots over, their position is effective. We've already established that.
Very good.
But on the issue of, yes, I think the right, this was the thought as you were saying this. I think the right recognizes this guy, and I'm glad that we haven't named him. I don't even know his name. I think the media has done a really good job of not naming him because he doesn't deserve that, right? Yes, he clearly crossed the line when he went and shot people, but did he cross the line if he was just saying this stuff online? And I'm asking that from like a conservative perspective. Were conservatives condemning him when he was saying this just online? Or does it just cross the line when he's like, now I will go kill people?
Well,
you see what I'm saying?
Are you talking about in the freedom of speech?
I think, right. It's not like he was saying.
Right, well, I get that he's free to say that, but
I don't think he was advocating violence in his manifesto.
No, but him saying there is a Jew progressive cabal to replace white people. Did he get called out by conservatives at that point saying,
well, I don't think he was a nobody, but I don't see any, there's some wacky stuff that the left throws out there by no namers, right? And I don't think
sure. I get that. But what I'm saying is it seems like this is moving closer and closer to being acceptable to say among conservatives that there is a replacement thing going on, right?
Possibly, I don't know. And I wouldn't say it's moving closer to conservatives. I think both sides are moving to the extremes. We've talked about this before as well. Yeah. But among mainstream conservatives, anybody I know hears that kind of whack job conspiracy theory is going to go, well, are you up in the night, buddy? So yeah, he has the right to say that under the First Amendment.
Right, I agree with that.
But it's not acceptable to anybody that I know where he's going to be saying, I don't think this is a widely accepted theory. That's kind of the left's trying to say that everybody on the right is racist now, and we buy into this theory. I don't think so, but I don't know that for sure. I don't know how you would know that.
Yeah.
Well, can I tie this back to my first point, which is,
well, let's do. So Ryan, or it seemed like you kind of agree that
I agree that the left demonizes the right, and they find ways to call them bigots.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
I agree with that.
Should we do kind of a closing argument thought and just sort of wrap it all into that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess mine's going to be almost more of a question that I want to bring up, I guess.
Cool. I like the discussion here. This is a fun discussion.
Because it loops back to my first point, which, I went through those points clearly in a logical order in my mind. But my first point was talking about the numbers, right? I won't bore you again with the numbers, but we're going from like 62-ish% non-Hispanic white. Over the next 40 years, it's going to drop below 50%. So non-Hispanic whites will no longer be the majority in the US.
They'll be the largest racial group, but they won't be the majority.
But they won't be the majority, okay? Mm-hmm. Which is just like, it's going to happen, okay? Right. So the idea behind, and it's not a replacement. It's not like anybody's being replaced, right? But the idea behind a shrinking non-Hispanic white population is real, right? Like that's real.
Sure.
So I'm bringing that back because I want us to wrestle with the idea of like the Great Replacement conspiracy theory is that it's intentional. Mm-hmm. And of course, we've all agreed, like it's not intentional. No one's doing that intentionally, but there is an element of truth behind the idea because there is migration and there is, migrants have more kids than people who have been here for a while. Okay. And that's a big factor that contributes to this is the average number of kids that first generation migrants have is higher than people who have been here for multiple generations. Yeah. So that's why you get, minority populations are growing faster than the non-minority populations. What's your guys' thought on that particular issue?
Go ahead.
So we talked about this when we talked about voter suppression. I should have found the clip. If I had more time, I would have found the clip where we found common ground on that one, because you said the right is trying to suppress minorities and stuff from voting, and I said, well, the left does the same thing. Both parties are going to do whatever they can to get more votes, and that's one of the big issues here. Is the right is accusing the left of opening the borders so that they can bring in all these immigrants to keep them in office, right? So if that's true. And I believe to a point it is, because you actually agreed it was, in that when we talked about that, the left does want immigrants coming in and they want it easier for people to vote because they think they're going to be the ones voting for them. Okay?
Well, I would modify that. I don't know that the left necessarily wants more people coming in, but they definitely want migrants who are here to be registered to vote, because there is a proclivity for some of them to vote left for a variety of reasons. But the 2016 and 2020 elections actually suggested that's not true anymore, right?
Which is the funny part about this. The largest conservative base is Latino, or the largest
the biggest shift.
Conservatives.
Yeah.
It's
in
Latinos.
Particular, that biggest shift was actually Hispanic individuals, Hispanic, Latino, however you want to, or Latinx, whatever you want to say. And there was actually a big shift among Black voters in the U.S. as well, voting for Trump. Yeah. So how Biden won was not with either of those groups. Those groups actually moved towards Trump.
Well, I think like he didn't actually win.
I think the majority is still voting left, but there was a bigger shift. Yeah.
That's why the whole thing's so funny, because the right is accusing the left of opening the borders to bring in voters, and the left is going, well, we want all these new migrants because they're going to vote for us. Well, they're both kind of wrong.
They're both wrong. Yeah.
It's kind of a funny thing. So if you want to say there is a push to replace white people, you could make the argument that there is, but it's not a racially motivated thing. It's a political thing. It's just politics. Of course, Democrats are going to try to bring in whoever they can to keep Democrats in power.
Yeah, but do you think that's actually what's driving their migration policies? I don't think it is.
I think for some of it is, because I don't think they actually know what they're doing. I think they think that if we can get all these immigrants in here, they'll be grateful for us because we pushed for it and they'll vote for us. I think some of them are really that stupid. I think that's the case. I'm not positive. That's just my gut feel on that.
This is part of my kind of closing Tommy's take stuff that I'll get into is that I think, because yes, I don't think there's some cabal, right, that's like, oh, we're going to do this, but I do think there's an inherent natural motivation to bring people in, right? And I think everyone knows that, and it's what Josh is talking about, that the voter rights or the the voting laws thing is the same argument of like they want minorities and especially immigrants and things to be able to vote because they will most likely vote for Democrats. And so I found the arguments for the wall to be very weird in that they were like, oh man, that wall is, Democrats were like, that wall is expensive. Oh, we can't buy that wall. I'm like, oh, this is the first time we've ever been concerned about money, right? And it was like $20 billion. Did we spent billions on like a rail gun research, right? That never became, but all of a sudden we were concerned about it. And I'm like, really? And then the environment issue, I'm like, I get the environment because it's a great talking point, but you're like, okay, what about all the thousands of miles of freeways we built everywhere, right? No one's batting an eye, but it's like all of a sudden
all the other fences that everybody's fenced their lands with.
Yeah. And it was like, and so I'm like, they just don't want it. I think one, they didn't want it because Trump wanted it. And it had a lot of political ammunition in it. And two, they want people coming across the borders, right? And not because of a conspiracy or some article or some memo that went out, right? Just because everyone knows, right? It's the same thing with the voter, like the voter suppression laws, right? That they're fighting against. They want minorities in the country and they want them voting, and because that's going to help them. And I just don't think. And so where I was going to go is with QAnon. I don't think.
QAnon.
QAnon. You can tell I'm a dedicated member. You're
out of the club, Tom.
Because I do think this supports sort of Josh's point earlier is that like QAnon has been villainized as well and really thrown out there as this weird thing. Now, but if you break it down, right, it's like, do I believe that the government is corrupt? Oh yeah. Right. I totally do. Right. I believe there's a lot of corruption in the government right now. 100%. Right. Do I believe that there's probably powerful groups that exploit children? Yeah. I've seen the Jeffrey Epstein thing. Right. I'm like 100%. I think we would all agree somewhere that's probably happening. And unfortunately, and
probably, definitely
those things are probably happening. Do I think because I saw a lot of articles that said a lot of Republicans believe in QAnon theory. And I'm like, well, yeah, to some extent, probably, but then you get into this weird stuff of like, because if you see a news article, they'll always throw, and then they believe that they're lizard people, right? And they're sacrificing children. And you're like, yeah, there's probably a small group that believes that, but you just threw it all in together to make it look absolutely ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And then it seems like this outrageous weird club that is totally perverse, right? And you're like, oh, those guys are crazy. And you're like, yeah, that's maybe like 2 to 3% that are like way on the fringe that you just threw in, and now everyone's a bunch of weirdos, right? And I just like that seems to happen a lot. I saw that happen with the Tea Party. When the Tea Party first emerged, they were branded as very violent. I remember watching an NPR article where they kept quoting, and they're like, oh, and we heard from this guy, and he's an ex felon, blah 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 blah, and they kept like, these guys are like distrustful. Dude, there was nothing, but the Tea Party was totally benign, but they got painted with a really rough brush. And I do feel like, to Josh's point, that happens a lot with the media, like, oh, QAnon, and now it's replacement theory, and like these conservatives are just crazy, and it's like there is some truth. And there's something, is it a cabal that's like meeting secretly? No, in robes in the middle of the forest. No, of course, I don't think that's happening, but it's like,
it would be cool, but no.
Yeah, it would make a great story. But like, yeah, but I mean, is there truth there? Yeah, I think there's some truth there, but it's like, I just don't think it's as organized or intentional as what it's being presented as. Anyway, that's sort of more of my take. Josh, I want to hear your thoughts.
I think you just nailed it. You really just nailed it. Because that's the. Wow, you seem disappointed that I'm agreeing with you.
Well, I'm the moderator, right? I will. Josh, you're not doing that. Here, let me take over.
It's that weird conflation that you just described. That's the problem. Okay, are there neo-Nazis out there that are about racial superiority? Absolutely. Are they the majority? No, they're probably less. I mean, they're less than 1%. I think they're just a few of them. So then you get this whole thing with immigration, right? And like Tom said, well, there's some stuff we should discuss here. There's some problems here. Let's discuss it. And then the leftist media, the leftist politicians, they blow this up and conflate it. And because anybody that has a problem with immigration, well, now they go, oh, you all must believe in this replacement theory thing. You're all racist. And they've been throwing out numbers in the media like 60% of Republicans are racist. Well, no, 60% of Republicans said that they have problems with, illegal immigration. And then they just conflate it and say, well, you're all racist. What? This is crazy talk. It's so the conflation that Tom just described, and he did a better job of describing it than I am. It's absurd. The trucker thing up in Canada, like one trucker beat up a guy. So suddenly the entire movement became a bunch of violent truckers, right?
Right.
This false conflation that they do is disgusting. So the media has been painting me as a conservative as a racist. And right before we started, I was talking to my buddy Jeff. Shout out to Jeff. I said, hey, I got to go prepare for the podcast. He said, what are you talking about tonight? And I said, replacement theory. Have you ever even heard of it? Because I really didn't know anything about it. And he said, I have no idea what that is. And I said, well, apparently, since we're conservative, we hate immigrants. And he said something along the lines of, well, I guess most of the guys at work are no longer my friends. And I said, yeah, the party I'm going to this weekend to watch the UEFA Champions League soccer final, I guess I can't go because it's with two immigrants. Like, I guess I hate immigrants now. That's what I'm being told. And it's silly.
Yeah, well, but it just like you're saying, the liberal media, whatever, is blowing up that there's a tiny percentage of people, and I've actually got some numbers that we'll come back to, a tiny percentage of people who believe this. Can we actually say the same thing on the left, right?
Absolutely.
I'm not out there going like every Republican now hates migrants. That is the problem.
Okay, you're
right?
not.
I'm not doing that. Like,
but we have
the vast majority of people I know are not.
Joe
doing
Biden
that.
just did. Nancy Pelosi just did. Chuck Schumer just did. Okay, so prominent. That's why I said it's not just leftist media. Of course, MSNBC is going to be doing it because that's what they do. But we have people in the government. These are people in
but we have
positions.
people in the government doing the exact same thing on the other side.
Sure. Well, give me some examples.
Pick any Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump, or
what did
Marco Rubio. Like any one of them is like.
I'm not saying they don't.
Right. I'm just saying, like, this goes on both sides. Can I throw in some numbers? And I think these are like get to your point, Josh and Tom, right? That you're like, oh, the media is conflating QAnon. So I actually know the director of PRRI. He's a good researcher, right? And they did a survey. I should look at when this was. Let me just get nice. February 24th, 2022. So they were trying to measure QAnon beliefs, and they have, I think, a good kind of representation of this. So you tell me if you think this makes sense. And it actually kind of agrees with you. I think it complicates it a little bit, but it kind of agrees with you. So the first question they asked, do you agree with this, right? The government, media, and financial worlds in the US are controlled by a group of Satan-worshiping pedophiles who run a global child sex trafficking operation. Exactly. They asked that of a large representative sample of Americans. Okay. 5% completely agree. So to your point about this being a small percent, I think you're right, but 11% mostly agree. Okay. And then you get 20% who mostly disagree and 60% who completely disagree. So it's not like this is a huge widespread thing,
right?
But it's not 1%. It's like 5% who are fully on board with the US are controlled by a group of Satan worshiping pedophiles.
Right.
Okay? Then they asked a second. So I've got 3 questions here that I think are pretty good, right? Second question. There is a storm coming soon that will sweep away the elites in power and restore the rightful leaders. Okay. That one, 6% completely agree. 16% mostly agree. So we're actually talking about like 22% of Americans.
Right.
Okay. And then the third one, because things have gotten so far off track, true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. 5% completely agree, 13% mostly agree. So your thoughts on that, right? Because I think it kind of supports your point, but complicates it a little bit, that there is sympathy for some of these ideas. And the questions were not really vague ones of like, do you think there's corruption in the government? No, it's straight up Satan worshiping pedophile stuff. Okay?
No, but yeah, but like when I went to say mostly, because the problem is it's mostly agree versus mostly disagree.
Completely agree, mostly agree, mostly disagree, and completely disagree.
But like both, I think we all agreed there's some corruption in the government. So it's like I would be in the mostly agree camp.
Me too.
Right? Which makes
on
it
Satan worshiping pedophiles who run a global child sex trafficking ring.
It's not clear what mostly agree means. There's too much gray area there. Yeah, yes, I think some of these guys are really bad. A lot of them are clearly sex traffickers,
Right.
So yeah.
Like I said, is there a Jeffrey Epstein? Another Jeffrey Epstein going on in the upper echelons of the U.S. government? I have no doubt in my mind that there's some nasty corruption going on. But like, so I kind of in that mostly agree. Are
you two genuinely telling me that you mostly agree that the government, media, and financial worlds in the U.S. are controlled by a group of Satan worshiping pedophiles who run a global child sex trafficking organization?
The way you're asking that is exactly proving my point, right?
Yes.
Do I agree with to some degree of that? Yeah. But like the way you put it, that makes it sound crazy. No, I don't agree that
that's the problem.
Satan worshiping cult, right? I know, I don't agree. I do selfish.
Okay, so where would you put yourself? You're clearly not completely agree. You're not even mostly agree. It's probably mostly disagree. With maybe and mostly disagree allows for some
portion of agreement. Yes.
Okay. So you would put yourself in mostly disagree. That wasn't in the
survey, right? So it's like,
well, it is. So it's completely agree, mostly disagree, and completely disagree.
But that's so vague. It's so vague.
How is that vague?
It is vague.
I'm sorry, that's super vague. Because
honestly, if I had to say one or the other, I'd say mostly agree versus over mostly disagree. And that throws me way over in the crazy camp. And
that's the problem with that kind of survey. Do I agree that it's an actual cabal and they wear hoods and they have a meeting under the Capitol building? No. And that's what that makes it sound like. Do I agree that some of these people worship themselves and are really, really bad people? Yes. Do I agree that a lot of them are pedophiles? Yeah. Okay. When I said sex traffickers,
because I actually, so you've heard of deep state, right, Ryan? Right?
Sure, I've heard the idea of deep state.
I totally believe there's a concept of deep state, right? Like that there are mishandlings within the government that are trying to keep itself in power, right? That is concerned with keeping itself in power and doing what it needs to stay in power. I totally believe that, right? That there's corruption in the government. Yes, that's that's any deep state. So it's like you take that and you could run with it, right? And then they're probably powerful people and they probably can abuse their power, right? It's like, once you've seen Jeffrey Epstein and like what he was doing. That's he wasn't happening all over the place.
Get that he wasn't in government. He was a big financier, but he had friends who were in government.
Yeah.
Right. They were part of this cabal.
Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew were all affiliated.
I'm aware of all of that.
I'm just saying.
Even Bill Gates. Let's throw our Bill Gates in there.
And you had no problem calling Trump, a sexual deviant and a pervert, which, he is. But I saw a picture that was purportedly pulled off of Hunter Biden's laptop, one of his missing laptops, of Joe Biden naked fondling some young girl. Okay. And I don't know if it was real, but he has been accused of this kind of crap. Okay. So I think most of these guys are perverts. And you look at somebody today was talking about, I was listening to a podcast. He's talking about Chappaquiddick, right? Where that douchebag Kennedy got drunk, crashed his car, killed this lady, right? You're familiar with the situation, Kennedy? Ted Kennedy.
Yeah.
And she was she a prostitute or something? I don't remember.
No, he was just a girl he met at a party.
Okay, but he basically killed her, and he got away scot-free. These guys have so much power; they're not liable to anybody. It's shocking. So, do I sound like a crackpot talking about that Chappaquiddick? It happened.
No, but I mean that like you're literally describing something that's real, right? But maybe the second two questions are like a little bit more loosey goosey, but seriously, a group of Satan worshiping pedophiles, and you're like, yeah, I mostly agree with that.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
That sounds crazy to me. Like, well, that's why batshit crazy stuff, guys.
It's the problem with the question.
Yeah.
Okay. There's so much. There's so many different ways to interpret that. You're agreeing with everything that we said, but I
understand.
So Ryan, how would you put yourself on that scale? How would you would say mostly disagree?
Yeah, no, completely disagree, right?
You would say completely disagree.
I cannot understand how there's gray area over Satan worshiping pedophiles who control everything. Okay. Like as soon as you put that in, like crazy flashing lights should go off and you're like, that's crazy talk.
Okay,
now, if you want to say
then tell me what mostly
corruption in the government
or mostly disagree. Tell me what that means. What does that mean to say I mostly disagree with that? Because in your mind, you're saying that this is exactly what they are. Well, how can I mostly agree? I mean, that's why the question's vague. What does mostly mean to you?
That you agree with most of what they're saying. So maybe you agree that there's like a group of pedophiles who run this, or maybe you agree that there's just an elite group of people who are running the government, media, and financial worlds, and they're probably into diddling kids, right? Like maybe you agree with parts of that, but you disagree with some of it.
So in my mind, say completely disagree unless it's exactly what they describe. That's what you're saying. Right?
That's the problem with these questions, because you're interpreting it as this is exactly what you're agreeing with.
And if Tom it's not 100% that, then I have to say completely disagree.
That's the problem with a lot of these polls.
That's interesting. I'm actually, I'm a survey researcher. So in my mind, I don't understand how anybody could even remotely agree with this. But the fact that you interpret the question differently is useful for me to know. And I may reach out to Bob Jones, the director here, and say, hey, I actually got some useful qualitative feedback on your questions. And this might be why you're getting the numbers that you are.
Totally.
I think the numbers are pretty inflated. That sounds super inflated to me. And I'd be interested to see what kind of numbers he pulled off a similar poll off what we're talking about today, the replacement thing. Because I believe I don't know this, but I can't imagine it's very many people that think there's actually a cabal of people out there that are all about replacing white people. That's pretty crazy. But to my point earlier, there are people that are pushing for immigration, and there are people in this country. This is part of the video I had earlier. They're pretty happy about this idea of replacing white people with brown people or something. Oh, this is going to be a great day when we have more minorities. Okay, that's a thing that's happening. So
it's a thing that's happening, but I don't think anybody is thinking about it that way. I don't think anybody's like, I want fewer white people in the US,
there are,
right?
There are. I could find you several people on the news that said this is going to be. I listened to a montage today where there were several reporters on like CNN saying this is going to be a great day when whites are no longer the majority. Okay,
really?
Weird. Yeah.
I've seen it celebrated as like, we're turning brown, and they're kind of like a mocking way to mock that Republicans or whites are afraid of this, right? And they're like, we're turning brown, and that's stick it to them kind of a thing.
I've seen that too.
I've seen that in a sort of celebratory tone.
I heard one lady today, a reporter on CNN, she was saying the browning of America is going to be great because then everybody will be represented and the demographics will be proper and white men will no longer have power. Like,
okay. So would it be fair to say,
crazy lady?
So here's the second point I want to get in my take was this, like, because Ryan's question was that the replacement theory is racist. And is it fair to say, because I would go away from racism more to cultural, right? That your culture is being changed, and that's what's concerning. And my point is that it's not racist because I've never seen a black person kicked out of a Trump rally, right? it's like in fact, they stick them up in front, right behind Trump, right, to show like, hey, look, there's black people that vote for, and they have a sign that says blacks for Trump. They're like, I'm a minority and I vote for Trump, right? They're very vocal about it. In that it's a cultural thing, right? People don't want their culture changed, and I think it's a very real issue in France. In that, they have people that don't speak their language, that are, these Nigerians and Algerians, right, that are coming and are very different and have a very different culture, and they don't look like the French culture at all, right? And I think that's a concern they have, right? And that they're like, French are losing their culture, right? There's like this whole program. If you go and live in an old French town, they'll like subsidize your rent or pay for it. No, there's a serious
yeah. No, I know what you're talking about.
And they're trying to, because everyone's moving into the cities and abandoning the culture, right? They're leaving like the old farm towns and stuff like that, and they're concerned about keeping their culture. I think that's a similar thing that Americans, white Americans are probably concerned with, is their culture changing, and we're becoming a very different country than the one that they grew up in. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being concerned about like that, because, you're like, well, this is how I knew this became a great country when I was growing up. Now it's changing. Therefore, it could be bad, right? Or it's unknown, or it's scary, right? I don't know, but like,
let me throw this question out there, because I read through most of that New Yorker article that Ryan posted earlier, because I really had no idea what we were talking about tonight. But they mentioned in that article that we celebrate distinct cultures, right? And the left is really worried about cultural appropriation, and we shouldn't steal from these cultures. The diversity of different cultures is a good thing. Well, how does that? How do you justify replacing, Americans and American culture with immigrants? Okay, and this is do you understand the weird? The weird,
yes, I'm trying
controversy of the question.
Understand.
Okay, let me see if I can. I'm not necessarily trying to push back. I'm trying to get some clarification.
Well, this is a question, because that's what it said in the New Yorker article.
Right.
We should celebrate cultures, but then we're going
and I get what you're saying.
Homogenize this culture.
I see.
As a sociologist, I think I would say I don't know that there is a universal American culture. There are many cultures inside the U.S. But two, it is, and that's kind of. I mean, I wasn't going to bring that up, but I think we need to bring that up. That we're all, except for the Native Americans, right, a bunch of immigrants. But to kind of go to Tom's point, like, what parts of the culture are we worried about changing? Right. So because I see your point, like, and I said this in my points earlier, that like, if we want to have a discussion about shifting demographics, I think that's perfectly fine. Let's just not call it a cabal of Satan worshiping pedophiles or whatever. Right. Like, no one's doing that on purpose. The question is it a good thing or a bad thing? And what I want to know specifically is like, what parts of your culture are you worried about changing? Because that's what I think I need to understand if I'm going to understand why people are worried about this. What are you worried about? That's a question. That's a question.
Because
right?
the way the leftist talking heads are framing it is it's all about race and skin color, which is why I had that conversation with my buddy about not being able to go hang out with my brothers-in-law this weekend because they're both immigrants. It has nothing to do with skin color. Nobody that I know cares what skin color people have when they immigrate here.
Okay,
it is
to Ryan's
point. Yeah, to Ryan's point.
What is it?
It's about what they're bringing. They're
okay. So
the good things and the bad. The good things, my two brothers-in-law, they love soccer. Bring it.
I agree.
I love it.
I think we're all on board with that, right? We're all big fans of soccer.
I have more in common with them than I have with most people here because of that.
Because you could care less about baseball and football and basketball. You'd rather watch soccer.
Pretty much. So there are good things that, and this is the experiment of America. We try to take the good things and assimilate those.
So what are the bad things? What are we worried about changing? That's a genuine question because I'm not sure I understand it.
See,
this is a really awkward silence.
Well, no, I'll just have to give it. I haven't really thought about it in that sense.
I'm gonna think like the one that comes to mind that I think that and I'm more saying this, that what I've observed is people like a reverence for the country, for the flag, right, and for like what it stands for, and that's been a culture that we uphold it and we honor it and we reverence it, and then the culture has been changing, right? There's this another culture that's like they don't care about the flag, and that Cinco de Mayo is celebrated at my school more than
you're
that's
not
a
in
big
school
day
during the 4th of July. I mean, to be fair,
Sure,
right?
sure.
Yeah,
But
so it's
it's a big
complicated.
deal at the school, and it's like, oh, we're gonna learn about this, and that's fine, right? But it's like, but does it start replacing the culture, right? It's the whole I'd say it's replacing it's a replacement of
let me
culture
extrapolate that just a little bit, because I like that thought, and it bugs me on a personal level when people come here. When my brother-in-law, who's from Paraguay, when the Paraguay and the U.S. played in soccer a couple years ago, so we went. I guess he was cheering for Paraguay, but he's an American. That kind of bugs me when the U.S. plays Mexico, because it's a huge soccer rivalry. When they play here in the U.S., Mexico usually has more fans. Okay, that bugs me as an American soccer fan. You're American now. Freaking support the American team. I look at you as an American. Why are you cheering for Mexico? Come on. That bugs me, but it's kind of trivial.
I'm actually really interested. I'm going to add to that. I play soccer, regularly with some guys. One guy at work, he's from Colombia. He's an American, right? He's a citizen now. He's been a citizen for decades. The U.S. men's national team played Colombia right by my house, right, in the Raymond James Stadium. We both went to the game, not knowing that he was going to the game, right? So we went separately and then talked about it afterwards. And of course, he was rooting for Colombia. It didn't bother me. I'm intrigued why it bothers you. Right? Because Tom, you have German heritage, right? Josh and I are crazy mutts. I don't even know who we could claim our heritage is genuinely, right? There's like Scottish, there's French, it's all over the place. Yeah. But if somebody's like an Irish American and they're totally a fan of the Irish, are we going to fault them for that?
I told you.
I'm just not sure. I agree. I recognize that. I'm just intrigued by
to support that. I once got after a couple girls that I worked with. They'd moved from California, and I supervised them. And they moved from California, and they were bagging on Utah. And I was like, and they were going on about Utah sucks and this and that. And I was like, guys, you did move from California. Why'd you move from California? You're like, oh, because this and this and this and this. And you're like, okay, well, Utah's not that bad, right? Or the whole you came here for a number of reasons and left California for a number of reasons, right? And you're like, it's not that bad, right? It must be decent enough that you moved here. And it's sort of the same theory. I think it's the same idea. If someone, I actually don't care if someone roots for another team, but I do. If you're here, you came here because it was probably better than where you came from, and therefore you should have some sense of it's probably a nationalism thing, right? Of I do think America is a great country, and I think you came here and then you're gonna wave a different flag. You're like, well, what are you doing? Why'd you come here?
It's almost like a gratitude thing for me, because I had this argument with a friend of mine where I was like, I went to this area and they were flying Greek flags. I'm like, well, we're in America. What do you do? And that's okay that you love your heritage. That's good. I actually like that. You should respect your roots and love your heritage. But you, like Tom said, you came here because you thought you had a better chance here than you did where you were at. And I don't want to get too personal with some people here. Don't you have any gratitude for the country that took you in and allowed you the opportunity to pursue life, liberty, and happiness? It's a lack of, again, it's almost trivial, but it reeks of ingratitude to me.
No, totally. If Elon Musk came here and if he was bagging on America all the time, right? He came from South Africa. That would really bother me, right? You'd be like, you came here and did all this amazing stuff, and now you're pissing all over everything that brought you that. It's the same idea. So I think you should be happy wherever you go, right? And anywhere. And if you decide to move, whatever, but be happy that you're here, right? And if you go back, be happy you're there.
So hypothetical, the two of you move to Mexico.
Yeah.
And the U.S. men's national team plays Mexico 6 months after you move.
Totally right. I know
Which
where you're going.
side do you sit on?
Right.
Who do you root
Mexico
for?
Sure. No, it's
See,
a fair
I
question.
think both of you would totally root for the U.S. still.
Probably.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Probably.
But
maybe, I don't know.
What if it's your kids 30 years from now? Now,
Right.
do you think your kids should be supporting Mexico?
Right. And they never even lived in the United States.
Right.
And,
you see what I'm saying? So
totally.
No, it's a great argument.
Give it some time and
give it some time.
Let everyone assimilate.
Well, that's more part of the problem, because you move like that Greek area I was talking about, or like a Chinatown or something.
Sure.
When a lot of migrants move to a certain area and take it over, they're not assimilating, that's problematic. Because if you're here and you're not learning the language, okay, that's a huge problem here. Speaking Spanish, like especially as a white guy, that's a pretty remarkable skill, because there's a lot of people here that don't speak English, so you need to speak Spanish to them. That's problematic when you don't assimilate. When your country is, you see what I'm saying. Not assimilating is very problematic. We want you here, but you need to assimilate. You need to learn the language. You need to get a job. That's great.
But when you say assimilate, and again, I'm not trying to like poke holes or anything. I'm trying to get deep into this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which parts do they have to assimilate? Because you also said we should allow them to celebrate their culture.
Sure.
Right. So
they should.
They get to keep their culture. But culture includes language. Culture includes values. Culture includes beliefs. That is what culture is. So when you say assimilate, and the same arguments are made all over Europe, right? And all over different places that are getting immigration is, okay, we'll allow you in, but you got to assimilate. Which parts do they have to assimilate?
Let me give you a negative. You look at the riots that just happened in Sweden all over the country. They were perpetrated by Muslims, right?
Yes. Because there was a guy who was going to burn a Quran.
Yes,
is that the one?
Yes.
Okay.
There was this very small group of, same people we've been talking about, these far right douchebags that are racist, and they don't like all of the Muslims moving up there, so they said they were going to burn a Quran. So the Muslims did the worst thing possible. They started riots and started burning down cities, right? Going, no, we are peaceful, burn them down. They're not assimilating, right? That's very problematic.
Okay, so but what specifically? Like, what do they need to assimilate? Is it the language? Is it the values? Is it respect for freedom of speech? Is it like
more the Constitution? Okay, if there's no freedom of speech, if I can't bash your religion, if you come here and you want to be Muslim, cool, good on you. But if I can't say anything about Muhammad or something, or you're going to burn my house down, you've not assimilated, because this is America and we can say whatever we want, dude. Okay, if you're not going to follow the Constitution, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, if you're going to be intolerant of my religion, I think that's what you need to assimilate. And if you don't have to speak English. I know plenty of people here that don't speak English. I know them, but it sure helps. Why are you here? Why did you come here? Okay. To pursue the American dream, I believe. So maybe you should assimilate to what follows after that in the Constitution. We say you're here to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, maybe you better be down with the Constitution.
I get what you're saying, Ryan, because yes, it's hard to distinguish. Because because I'll give you an example that supports your point of like, I have a neighbor, doesn't speak English, super nice guy, so grateful to be here. And he talks about that a lot, in his very broken English. So like, is he ever going to learn English? Probably not, right?
It's first generation. It's really hard to learn a language as an adult. It's really hard.
I respect that he likes that he's very happy to be here, right? And that's why I'm like, oh, you're okay, right?
Yeah,
you're okay. But
we love that
guy over there, right? The funny thing is I like him because I can tell he's trying to take on the culture. But if there was another guy that didn't and might speak English but was very disdainful of our culture, I would be upset at him, right? But what's that line, right? That's, he's like he's more assimilated than my neighbor, but like it's like so it's almost like in this it kind of sounds bad, right? It's like a very nationalistic point of view of like, you want someone to come here, you want them to respect, be happy they're here, be grateful they're here, you act like a guest, right? Rather than
maybe
be a good guest.
Maybe it's, do you want to be an American, or are you just here using us? Are you just here using our economy?
Yeah.
Are you just here for a paycheck, or do you want to be an American?
Yeah.
If you want to be an American, awesome. We love you.
Okay, but what does that mean?
No, I know.
Because I already said there are many cultures here, right? There are many cultures in the US.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the Amish. The Amish are American, right?
Sure.
Is that the culture that we are demanding, or is it?
Well, it can be, because they want to be American.
I think that's what Josh hit on the head is that if you feel like you're grateful to be there, because like that's what I was saying. If Elon Musk was like, this place sucks, right? I'd be like, dude, you got rich here because of us, right? You came to because he's basically acknowledged that he couldn't have done what he did in South Africa, right? And then. And that makes you even, because you're like, oh yeah, he recognizes that this is a great country and he has these opportunities that he wouldn't have anywhere else. And if he didn't acknowledge that or was disdainful of that, that would really rub me the wrong way. And I'd feel like he wasn't trying, or like, I don't even know if it's a cultural thing. It's almost like a gratitude thing. I think I almost like, and that might be it. It's like that we don't feel like we don't like people that come in and aren't grateful to be here, right?
Let me
is that racist? I don't think it's racist, but I think it's a cultural. You definitely, because I even sympathize, and this sounds horrible. I even sympathize when people are like, go back to the country you came from, when they're not speaking English, right? It's the same vein, right? But but that comes off as very racist, right? Because you're like, you're not speaking the language. And I think it's more like they're not trying. You know, an immigrant comes over, they don't even try to learn the language, and it pisses people off, right? I would never do that. I get, because I've lived in a foreign country and tried to learn the language, right? It's like, I get it. It's hard, but I think that's going too far. But I understand.
Definitely going too far.
I can sympathize with that, right? That like, I understand like that same thinking, right? I think I've got the same, but I'm just a little bit more level-headed about it. But like, I think it's a natural, it's a natural feeling.
Let me complicate it a little further. I heard one of that same CNN lady I was listening to earlier. She said, America is founded on racism, and it's the most racist country, and it's terrible. And when conservatives hear stuff like that, whether it's true or not, and that's obviously not, it's not the most racist country ever. That's just a dumb thing to say. But where so many conservatives fall on that is, well, then leave if it's so terrible. Okay. And again, it comes back to the gratitude thing. If you like being here, then maybe show some gratitude for the good stuff. That's not to say that there aren't bad things that happen and things that we couldn't do better. Of course not. That's not what we're saying. But if it's so bad here, then leave. I keep thinking of this story that I can't remember who told me this story. It was somebody I know. He was in he was in the line at the grocery store, and this lady in a burqa was standing in front of him talking to somebody else, saying, I've been here in America for a while, and it's so bad here, and I hate these people, and they're all dirty and they're all foul. This is such a horrible country. And he actually said, well, then why? He interrupted her. She was on the phone. He said, well, why are you here? Well, because I got a job. That's what rubs people the wrong way, right? If it's so great where you're from, why did you leave? Just acknowledge why you're here.
Right. Right. And it's clear she's using us for a job, right?
Yeah.
And that I think that feeling rubs people the wrong way. Yeah. I get that.
And again, you could argue it's trivial, but
okay.
I don't know that it is.
Any last thoughts? Ryan, thoughts?
I feel like he was.
Ryan, do you sympathize with any of this at all, or is it all completely foreign?
It wasn't a trap. I was genuinely interested. I'm trying to figure out what parts you actually care about. So,
both. I think
parts you care about.
We opened the kimono a little bit, and we're very honest, I think, about our feelings. But like, is there any part of you that, like, if someone came in and was like, "Oh, America sucks and it's the worst place in the world," would you be like, "No, it's great," right? Or would you just be like, "Yeah, totally, I get it, man"?
No, I think my feelings are more complicated, right? Like I do like the US. I am not of the opinion that the US is the best country on the planet just because of statistical reasons, right? Like you can point to any area where it's not the best country for a variety of reasons. But I think where my position lies a little bit different from yours is I think it's perfectly fine to criticize the US. And I think Josh said this, right? There are clearly warts, there are problems.
Yeah.
I just would go so far as to say, like, okay, we can talk about those, right? And that doesn't make me ungrateful. It doesn't make me somebody who you should say, like, oh, if you don't like it, leave. No, that you're taking it, too far with someone like me who I do like the U.S. I had an opportunity to move to Norway, and I chose not to for a variety of reasons. Right?
What if they say to you, the country I came from is way better than this place. This place sucks. What if they say that? What are your feelings when they say that to you?
I would be interested to know why they think it sucks.
It doesn't bother you. There's no nationalistic pride at all within you.
Well, I mean, that's not where I immediately jump, right? And this does get back to the book that I talked about earlier, right? Like moral politics. Progressives and conservatives both are moral, right? They just think about things in different ways.
Yeah,
so it's clear, like you are both saying, hey, no, you have to be this way for me to be okay with you being in the US. And I'm like, that is not something that strikes me as horrifically bad, right? Now, if somebody said, I want to get on some planes and fly them into the World Trade Center because I hate US so bad. Now we got beef, right? Like you've crossed a line. That's not okay. Or if somebody said, because I'm a Muslim, I'm going to try and kill a bunch of people. Again, we've got beef. You've moved too far. I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
But if you just want to say like,
and let me be clear, like when someone's like rubbing the US into the ground, I don't like go polish my gun or anything like that, right? It's like people do that all the time on TV. Does it bother me? Yeah, it bothers me, but there's lots of things that bother me, right? It's
sure.
Just, I don't, I'm not, there's plenty, people are doing plenty of it, right? So I'm just like, this is how I feel. It's but can I tolerate it? Yeah, I'm a man. Yeah. I can take it. Anyway, yeah, so I get it. But yeah, sorry, finish your thought. Right.
No, I just think it's really interesting that we have, I don't mean to use this word in like the woke left way, but we have different triggers, right? That set us off, that bug us. Mm-hmm. And for both of you, it sounds like people who are not multi-generation, residents of the United States. If they're first generation immigrants or they're recent immigrants, right? They need to show some gratitude. And that is not something that just sticks out in my mind of like, you must do this, or this is really going to bug me. And I get that neither of you saying like you'd be violent against them or anything like that. It just bugs you.
They don't need to. Right? I just prefer, I like it when they do.
You like it. You'd prefer that. Right. And for some reason, and I don't know why that is, right? It just, that is not something that sticks in my craw that somebody would have to do. Maybe it would. Maybe if I saw somebody who really was just like completely, ungrateful about the fact that they've got a better life here or something like that, maybe it would bug me if I saw it like blatantly and I was like, that's kind of not cool, right? But for some reason, it just doesn't strike me as like that would be a huge sticking point for me. And it could just be we have, different moral sticking points.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Cool. Well, good. That was good. That was a fun episode. I enjoyed the conversation. So the great replacement theory, I think we exhausted that one and beat it to death. So I think we all agree there's no great cabal that's operating behind a curtain with pulling levers and drafting memorandums, but that there are.
We all wish there was, because it would be a better story.
Maybe there are some people with certain agendas that seem to support that and possibly. And that, maybe there's some like that a lot of white America is concerned about it, but just enough that it can be kind of like interpreted as that that they're feeding into this idea, right? And I'm sure there are some for sure. But all right, cool guys, thanks, and we'll call it a night.
Josh, we may not always agree when it comes to politics, even though we're trying, but there is one thing we agree on. There is only one way to clean up after going to the bathroom, and that's with a Lux bidet.
I've been a proud owner of a Lux bidet for years. I have literally owned a Lux Neo 320 since 2013. That's the warm water model. Talk about happy, fun, poopy time. When I leave the bathroom, I know I'm clean and ready to talk politics in a civilized manner.
Exactly. Using a toilet without a bidet is about as uncivilized as it gets. Civil conversations demand civil hygiene practices.
And that is why our listeners should get themselves a Lux bidet.
And just to be clear, Lux is not supporting one side or the other in this podcast. They support civil conversations and clean butts.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Finding Common Battlegrounds. The music is by Ben Sound. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not those of their employers. For more information or more episodes, you can find us at findingcommonbattlegrounds.com.
So yeah, conservatives talk about balanced budgets a lot. Has the senator proposed a balanced budget amendment or bill?
Not as far as I'm aware, but my state, right? Some states have done this. So the state of Florida, we have it in our constitution that we have to have a balanced budget.
Yeah,
we can't have deficit spending, right?
I think Utah's the same. I think we have to have a balanced
so
budget.
there are a number of states that have basically just legislated this, put it into their constitution,
which is good, right?
Yes, though. If you talk to economists, some economists would actually argue that having some debt is good.
Some debt, not
some debt.
$20 trillion
right.
Debt.
Yeah, I don't think any of them would agree that 20 trillion is good, but some debt is good because it allows for kind of borrowing, lending, and the government. Yes. It can help manage the market to some degree.
Well, in a time of war, you'd want the government to go, okay, we need to borrow some money. But the problem is you give these lunatics that kind of leeway, and now we're $20 trillion in debt. Right. That's the problem.
And I love that by lunatics, Josh actually meant all politicians there, not one party or the other, because I totally agree.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things, as a product person,
I'm still here.
My profession is all about prioritization. That's all it is. You have a pipe and you can shove so much down this pipe, and it's all about managing prioritization. And that's what a balanced budget essentially does. It forces prioritization. And then it's a matter of military is most expensive. Social programs military is important. Social programs are important. We just have to work it out. Right. And we got to get in a room and duke it out and figure out which one gets the most money, which I'm a big proponent of. That's the issue though, is inevitably there's some emergency that will, even if we passed a balanced budget bill, there'd be some emergency that would then be like, oh, we have to go to debt.
You could put that in the bill easily enough if, there's a certain emergency.
Well, what I'm saying is the emergency would come up and then we'd be like, oh, we let the genie out of the bottle and we debt up.
Yeah.
There's a great video. It's Ray Dalio's Changing World Orders. It's an awesome video, really well done. And it kind of goes into this, that governments inevitably just debt up, and then and especially the reserve currency power, the power that holds the reserve currency always debts up and kind of ruins the currency. And he goes through all these patterns that has happened through time, and it's really well done video. But he's saying basically saying America's on the decline, China's on the rise, and China's beating us on a lot of things: technology, education, and these are all characteristics of a rising nation. It's production, and there's a few other things. And then the last thing that always goes is reserve currency. And we still hold the reserve currency right now, but there's this, so right now we're in this weird inflation, but the reserve currency's actually gotten real expensive. So the dollar's gotten real expensive. And actually people have been like Saudis and who else was it? Like there's some African nations that are trying to pay in other things besides the reserve currency because it's real expensive. And so which is like the beginning of the end of like the reserve currency when you start working around it.
Well, I hate to say it, but China's zero COVID policy may actually be helping us, right? I mean, it's killing us as far as inflation, but they've shut down their economy, and their economy is actually shrinking right now.
Yeah.
Because they keep insisting like, oh, we're not going to have COVID.
Have you?
They're going to have COVID. Everybody's going to have COVID. It's just the reality, right? The genie's out of the bottle. It's done.
Well, I know it's such a weird thing. Their whole this is awful.
Well, it's just.
You've seen the videos with like the fences around the apartment building so that people can't get out of the apartments, and like they're out there, they're banging on pots and pans. They're like, we're starving.
They're screaming. Yeah, they're screaming at night. Yeah. It's terrifying.
It's completely unrealistic what they're trying to do.
It's unrealistic. It's horrifying.
And it's inhumane. Yeah, it's inhumane.
It's horrifying.
Yeah. You shut down a whole city. And you're like, okay, maybe 2% had COVID, and it cycles through, and they're done with it. But then it's just gonna spread back again. Right. What are you gonna do? Keep doing this over and over again?
Apparently.
I don't get it.
No, I mean, if it was a virus like monkeypox, right, which is hard to transmit, you can shut that down by contact tracing. But when you get something like Omicron with COVID, that spreads without symptoms
all over the place.
It sucks. I certainly am not celebrating the millions of lives that have been lost. It's horrific. That's terrible. But once it got out, it was done. We were done for. There was really nothing we could do.
Sorry to get back to the economy. So China's actually their debt crisis with have you heard of Evergrande? And
yes.
These big real estate things. That is really interesting, and it keeps rearing its head, but then the story kind of disappears. But I think that one's going to be a big issue in the near future, because they've got some big weird debt problems that they're going to be dealing with as well. But I don't know how that compares. How it compares to ours, and if it's like, I don't know. But,
well, we do need to solve our debt issue, and I would be fully in favor of a balanced budget without the caveats for emergency spending, because what we should have is just a reserve fund, right? So we should be doing so well financially that we spend what we bring in minus, I don't know, $50 billion a year or something, and that just gets slotted into a reserve fund that we're holding, right? And a lot of nations actually have that. So they have a sovereign wealth fund that they end up investing in a lot of different things.
Yeah.
We should be doing that. I mean, if we were smart, we would do that kind of stuff. But
the politicians are so corrupt, that's just going to be their slush fund, and they'll just start handing it out to each other, because that's what happens to the money now. I saw a great quote the other day that said, when rich countries give to poor countries, it's the poor people of the rich countries giving money to the rich people of the poor countries.
Yes.
So that $50 billion we just sent to Ukraine, a small percentage of that might get sent to the military, but most of it's going to sent to the corrupt politicians and the rich people and the people in charge of that money, and they're going to pocket it and go, thanks, guys.
Did you hear about I know it's New York Times, but just bear with me. They just did a story. It came across my newsfeed because they didn't cite the actual academics who did a lot of the research, but they did a story on Haiti paying France. Did you hear about this?
No.
So when Haiti fought for its sovereignty, right? So they became free. The French government sent over a bunch of warships and said, hold on, you have to reimburse all of our former slave owners. You owe us, hundreds of millions of francs.
This is like 100 years ago or something.
Yeah, but they ended up paying it for decades.
You're kidding.
No. So Haiti was the only country where the slaves had to actually pay their former slave owners. Yeah. And they actually calculated that if Haiti hadn't had to do this, they would be just as developed as all of the other countries in that region of the world. This destroyed Haiti's economy.
Why did they do it?
Benefited from it because they sent warships.
Well, we did the
France
same thing.
Literally did this. Yeah.
We did the same thing to the Germans after World War I. We said, well, you guys lost, so you got to pay reparations. So we destroyed their economy as they're trying to rebuild from this devastating war. And that's what led to World War II. We demanded reparations from people that had nothing because we just devastated their country.
Yeah. But what I don't get is Haiti won, right? Haiti won. And then we're like, that's like the U.S. winning. The U.S. winning and England sends a bill. That's for all the damages.
Well,
crazy. That's crazy.
And they actually sent warships multiple times. So they sent right after the war, right after they lost. and said, no, you owe us this money. And the government in Haiti was like, okay, yeah, don't blow us up. We'll give you the money. And then they couldn't pay it. They literally couldn't pay it. It was like 4 times their total GDP is what they had to pay in the first year. And so they're like, well, okay, we can't pay it. And then they're like, great, now you owe us. You're in debt. We're going to control your economy.
So what you were saying, Josh, about charging people who can't pay. So that's actually interesting, because in Ray Dalio talks about that in the Changing World Orders, that one of the symptoms of the country that's like the leading, the dominant country, is that they have the reserve currency, they can borrow a whole bunch, and it ends up making the rich, you end up creating class inequality.
Yeah.
And usually at the end of the cycle, there's a lot of like civil disorder because of this, right? And it's this sort of like, the Occupy Wall Street stuff, this sort of movements, right, is very indicative of like that kind of like, oh, the 1%, evil 1%, and that kind of stuff. That
Jordan Peterson even talks about this. He calls it the Pareto principle. He called it the 80-20 principle, where it really is a problem when a small minority of people end up with all the power and all the money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the left is more, this is what the left should be concerned about, right? The dispossessed. That's the proper place of the left, is fighting for the people on the bottom end of that spectrum, because anytime that pyramid becomes too acute, narrow, right? Yeah. Too narrow, and you have all that money at the top, the systems do crumble. That always happens. And the capitalists in our country, the people on the right in our country don't want to admit that capitalism does lead to that, because capitalism is the best system for flattening out that curve, because people do enter that 1% and leave the 1% all the time. But it is capitalism slows it down more than any other system. Communism, socialism, they increase that really fast, so the people at the top have all the money and all the power. But it still happens in capitalism. So what you're saying very well could be the case, that the U.S. is headed for a big downfall, because how much money is at the top. And it's not just the money, it's how much power is at the top. That's the problem.
Yeah.
But finish your thought with Ray Dalio. That was interesting.
Oh, that's basically it. But that we were in this cycle, and that he's basically predicting that eventually America will lose the reserve currency, and that'll be like and he says it's always transitioned through some kind of conflict, either an internal conflict like a civil war, or an external conflict, usually with the rising power, right? Us fighting Ukraine, e.g. China invades Taiwan and we try to defend it, and then we get our butts kicked. Something like that. But
interesting.
But
kind of hoping it's Civil War, because at least the Republicans are going to win that one, because we got the
guns. Yeah, sure.
You're outnumbered like 3-1, though.
Oh my gosh, no, we're not.
And then
plus we have the guns. If we have all the guns, I'll take those odds all day.
You have no ports. We have all the coasts. We have all the shipping.
We'll have them pretty
matter.
quick.
We're all speaking Chinese by the end of it.
Ni hao. Probably true.
Ni hao.